We were together almost 2.5 years. It's been almost 10 months, and I'm still not over it. I'm 41 years old, so I know I'm at a big age to live as I please. I met my ex-partner, a 44-year-old man, on a dating app in the fall of 2020, and we finally met in person on New Year's Eve 2020. We were pretty much inseparable after that. When we did finally meet, we just clicked, unlike any other relationship I had been in. He was all of the things, and he even matched me on an intellectual level. I didn't have to dumb it down for him like I've had to in the past. I could be myself. But he was also a felon, a juvenile offender of a violent crime. I connected with him after he was sentenced and released and on parole. Shortly after we met in person, I learned all the details of what he'd done. I later went to Google and confronted him to tell me everything, and he did. From what he told me, and from what I read in court documents, I could understand and rationalize, not necessarily excuse, how his circumstances at the time landed him in the situation he was in. I was willing to judge him for the man in front of me and not the dumb teenager he was. When I met him, he had already established himself. My guard was always up, looking for any red flag or reason to leave him. He had been away for 22 years. He was extremely supportive of me when I experienced some health issues, even trying to be more strict than the doctors. He said, "You have to stay healthy because you can't die before I do." He was everything a partner should be, and believe it or not, it was the healthiest adult romantic relationship I've ever been in. I was happy in our love bubble. I didn't want to tell my parents about him, specifically my mother, because I knew she wouldn't accept him or understand. I selfishly didn't want to ruin my bliss, and he was well aware he was a hard pill to swallow. I had mentioned him to my mother, but I only talked about him in general and without too much detail. In late 2021, I had started looking for a new job within the state and nationally. We discussed the real possibility of me moving, and he told me he'd follow me anywhere, and I believed him. He'd be off parole in fall 2022. Cut to spring 2022, when I'm offered a position in my home state where my family was. He was okay with us being long distance for a few months until he was free to join me, and in the interim, I was only a couple hours away to visit him every month. I had told my dad about him before I left for my new job. I told him he was a felon and the generalities of his crime. He came up to meet him, and they chatted privately. My dad wasn't completely on board, but he trusted my judgment. I thought we were halfway there. Neither of them told me exactly what they discussed, but I do know my father never asked him in detail what he did, which seems strange to me. Very shortly after he was off parole, he came to be with me in fall 2022. My father knew. My parents are divorced, but I hadn't told my mother he was now living with me, and I didn't tell her until she asked in December. I told her that he was a felon and what his general crime was. She was disappointed I hadn't told her, but at that point, she seemed open to meeting him, and we would go over her house for Christmas. Christmas came, and she got sick. She had Googled him. 2 days later, my parents basically staged an intervention with me, urging me to dump him. Regardless of what I said, they weren't really budging. At the intervention, the approach they took was more out of concern and trying to understand. And we know you may need some time to make the right decision. I did not intend to leave him. I loved him, and I felt with time they'd see who he was, and they could eventually come around to at least tolerate him or respect my decision. But over the next few months, my mother made things extremely difficult. When I interacted with her, it was always tense, and she'd always ask, why? Why him? She doubled down and started manipulating me and making me feel like I was wrong, like I was doing this to hurt her, as if she had done something wrong in raising me. Claiming she sacrificed so much by never remarrying to protect my sister and me, I'm sorry, I didn't choose to be born. That she had gone 35 plus years with no trouble from me, and now this. They made me feel like a naive child who couldn't think for themselves, not the middle-aged woman that I am. This was my life. Why couldn't they let me make my own decisions and respect it, and trust that they had raised me with a good head on my shoulders, and that I was a compassionate, open-minded, non-judgmental individual? While I stood by my man, I didn't strongly voice all of that at the time. so perhaps they felt I was just being a defiant child. And my father, being this Christian and using scripture against me, when I'm sure I could have also found some Bible verses to counter the hypocrisy of it all. My partner didn't care that my parents didn't like him. However, he saw the emotional strain this rift was having on me, and he had told me he never wanted to come between me and my parents, as my time left with them is limited, and he knows what it's like to not have those relationships. I felt time would change things. The weekend he decided to leave started off great. Then Sunday, I had a phone conversation with my mother, and he had overheard some of it in the next room. It was then that he decided to sacrifice our relationship to save mine and my mother's. It was the only way he could think to fix it. My initial feeling was relief, or maybe I was just numb, but then I was and still am heartbroken. It got so bad that I started therapy to cope, as my emotions were affecting my work. I never ended a relationship when you both were still in love and in a good place is foreign to me. And I can't help but have anger and resentment toward my mother. I completely understand any hesitation or concerns she may have had as my parent. And admittedly, there are things I could have done differently in how I introduced him to my family. But the total lack of empathy, the manipulation and unwillingness to trust me and be open, unalives me. Even now, she says I made a bad decision, and at least you know what to look for in the next one. She just doesn't give a frick that I've been miserable and that she was the factor. How am I supposed to come back from that? I wouldn't say the door is completely closed with him. He still communicates with me, but he is seeing someone. While I hope the universe leads us back to one another, I'm trying really hard to not hold on to that hope. I've been working on handling the grief, not shutting down during difficult conversations/situations, asserting I'm an adult in control of my life and not seeking approval, and establishing boundaries with my mother. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Could there be a reconciliation with my ex? Are you still in contact with your parents and letting them influence you? If so, I doubt there's much you can do because they will continue to make your partner feel like less than. Sorry. Comment 2. Normally I'd be like, you are grown and you need to live your life. But the fact that both your parents were fine with him being a felon and only took a stand when they found out the specifics of what he did makes me think it was really freaking bad. In which case, they are probably right. Although you need to decide that for yourself and not them. Now for the update. Hey everyone, it's been 2 weeks since my last post, and boy, do I have an update for you. You might remember how my ex, the man I met on a dating app, and I broke up because of the strain his past put on my relationship with my parents. Well, things have taken a turn, and I'm still trying to process it all. After our breakup, my ex started seeing someone new, which was a tough pill to swallow. I was trying to move on, but it was hard not to think about him. Meanwhile, I was working on setting boundaries with my mom, who had been a major factor in our split. It was a rough patch, but I was determined to stand my ground. Then, out of the blue, my ex showed up at my door. He said he couldn't stop thinking about me and that his new relationship made him realize what we had was special. I was shocked, to say the least. We talked for hours, and he told me he had ended things with the other woman because his heart wasn't in it. But that's not even the most surprising part. My dad, who had met my ex before and had a mysterious chat with him, called me up. He said he had been doing some thinking and realized he might have been too quick to judge. He told me he saw how much I cared for my ex and that he trusted my judgment. He even offered to talk to my mom about giving my ex another chance. I couldn't believe it. My dad, who had always been a bit distant and strict, was showing a side of him I had never seen before. It was like he was finally seeing me as an adult capable of making my own decisions. With my dad's support, I felt a new sense of confidence. I decided it was time to have a heart-to-heart with my mom. I told her how much I loved my ex and how much it hurt to have her against our relationship. I reminded her of all the times she had taught me to be compassionate and open-minded, and I asked her to try to see my ex for the man he is now, not the teenager he was. To my surprise, she broke down in tears. She admitted she had been scared of losing me and that her actions were out of fear, not malice. She apologized for not trusting me and agreed to meet my ex again, this time with an open heart. The meeting was tense at first, but as my ex shared his story and his regrets, I could see my mom's walls starting to crumble. She asked him tough questions, but she listened to his answers. By the end of the night, she was laughing at his jokes and even gave him a hug goodbye. It's been a whirlwind of emotions, but I'm happy to say that my ex and I are back together. My parents are slowly warming up to him, and it feels like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I never thought we'd get to this point, but here we are. I've learned a lot about myself and my family through this ordeal. I've realized that standing up for what I believe in is important, but so is forgiveness and understanding. It's not easy to mend broken relationships, but it's worth the effort. I supported my boyfriend financially for 5 years while he was unemployed and addicted to drugs. But now he says I don't care about him because I won't sleep with him. Oh boy, I have some news for him. We have been together for almost 7 years, and here are the cliff notes. We met at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Addiction issues, Tay. We started living with each other in month 3. Impulsive behaviors. I had recently gotten out of an eating disorder rehabilitation and was living at my parents' house, and he was just getting out of a halfway house, homeless and broke. That being said, we quickly found comfort and support in each other, and for the most part, stayed away from our drug of choice. Not to sound cliché, but in the beginning, I believed I couldn't have been luckier to have met him. Finally, someone who wouldn't judge me, wanted to make me happy. And most of all, I didn't feel like all he wanted from me was intimacy, which couldn't have been better at that point. Cut to a series of events and arguments that has ultimately led to years of going down the same rabbit hole. He started using drugs, which caused his behavior to drastically change, which inevitably turned me off, which resulted in us having less intimacy than what he wanted. Side note, I have never been a physically affectionate person. Like, I wouldn't even want my mom to hug me for the longest time. My love languages are acts of service and words of affirmation. Anyways, his love language is physical touch, so he wasn't thrilled when my lack of interest was becoming more frequent. That argument has evolved over the years now. Some other important things to note are that he got locked up for 5 months, about a year or so into the relationship. When he got out, he did contracting work until infection 19, and since then hasn't had any consistent income, so I've pretty much been supporting him financially for at least 4 years. He's extremely talented when it comes to home renovation, woodworking, fixing most things, and has the potential to find a successful career path, but shows zero interest in taking the steps towards making that happen. Did I say cliff notes? Anyway, the lack of security and safety I feel doesn't make me all hot and bothered or eager to be physically intimate, and I want to be intimate with him. But he usually says or doesn't do something to sabotage that from happening. I should also mention that he's got a herniated something in his balls, and for a while now, he can't make himself finish when he masturbates, which causes him pain, and if he doesn't finish after 2/3 days, he gets extremely agitated and verbally aggressive and says that I should help him not be in pain, which really makes any form of intimacy sound super intimate. I hope you hear my sarcasm. So in conclusion, even though I've put up with his inability to regulate his emotions, financially supported him, made healthcare appointments for him, continued to have intimacy about 1 to 3 times a week on average, his conclusion is that because I don't give him intimacy as much as he wants it means I don't care about him. I'm selfish, I'm the narcissist, and therefore he has every right to get angry, throw tantrums, insult me, etc. Thanks for reading. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You don't care about me. You're selfish. You're a narcissist. You're right. As of this moment, I am setting you free to find a better woman. My parents have agreed to let you sleep in the guest room for 1 week while you look for a place to live. Real talk. Why are you more focused on justifying your actions in this dysfunctional relationship than on ending the relationship? Comment 2. Seems like he became your drug of choice and you keep him around regardless of how negatively he impacts your life. It is time to love yourself enough to end this and start a new chapter in your life. He is selfish and he is using you, and you are letting him. Time for him to go find someone more compliant and to be accountable for his own life. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around after my last post. It's been a chaotic couple of weeks, and I've got some updates that I think you'll find pretty shocking. So, remember how I mentioned my boyfriend's lack of consistent income since Infection 19 hit? Well, things took a turn when he decided to start his own woodworking business out of our garage. I was skeptical at first, given his track record, but I have to admit, the guy's got skills. Orders started coming in, and for a brief moment, it felt like we were on the verge of something great. But here's the kicker. He started spending more time in the garage than with me. I mean, I get it, starting a business takes effort, but it was like I didn't exist. And when I tried to talk to him about it, he'd snap at me saying I didn't understand the pressure he was under. Now, let's rewind a bit. Before all this, we had our issues, sure. His stint in jail, his addiction battles, and my own struggles with an eating disorder. We were two broken pieces trying to fit together. But we had a system, He'd fix things around the house, I'd handle the bills, and somehow we made it work. But as his business grew, so did the distance between us. He was making money, finally contributing financially, but our connection was fading fast. And then came the confrontation that I never saw coming. One night, after he'd been particularly distant, I found a text on his phone. It was from a customer, a woman, who was a little too friendly, if you ask me. My heart sank. I confronted him, and the argument that followed was like nothing we'd ever had. He accused me of not supporting his dreams, of being too needy. I shot back, reminding him of all the times I'd been there for him, financially and emotionally. In the heat of the moment, he let slip that he felt more appreciated by his customers than by me. That stung. I mean, I've been the one making healthcare appointments for him, dealing with his mood swings, and trying to keep our relationship afloat. But here's where things got really twisted. The next day, he came to me, all apologetic, saying he'd been stressed and didn't mean what he said. He even suggested we go to couples therapy, which was a shocker because he'd always been against it. Desperate to fix things, I agreed. Therapy was an experience. We dug up a lot of old dirt, like how he felt abandoned when he was locked up, and how I felt neglected when he wouldn't look for work. It was raw and emotional, and for a moment, it seemed like we were making progress. Then, 2 days ago, I came home early from work to find him in a compromising position. No, not with another woman, but with his woodworking equipment. He'd somehow managed to get his injured area caught in one of the machines. It was both horrifying and bizarre. I rushed him to the ER, and the whole way there, he kept mumbling about how this wouldn't have happened if I'd been more attentive. Now, here's the misunderstanding that's got me reeling. After the ER visit, he was on pain meds and started rambling. He confessed that the text I saw wasn't what it looked like. The woman was just a satisfied customer who'd left a flirty comment, nothing more. He'd been too proud to explain, too caught up in proving he could be successful on his own. I didn't know what to believe. Was this just the pain meds talking, or had I jumped to conclusions? The trust between us was already hanging by a thread, and this revelation, true or not, felt like a slap in the face. Dad's dying of brain cancer, but I don't want to visit him. Then his wife calls and says he's asking for me here. My father, 62-year-old man, is dying of brain cancer. It seems like he's getting to the point of dying. I, 27-year-old man, am conflicted about going to visit him. I know I probably should, but there are basically 2 reasons stopping me, delaying my decision. 1 and 2, while 3 is more of a reason I don't feel as bad if I were not to visit him. 1, I don't want to see him in the state he is in, bedridden, withering away, and losing himself. I've always known him as laughing, making jokes, walking around, and full of energy. Now he is constantly tired, sleeping, and slow to respond. 2, I have a phobia of flying, and there is no direct flight to where I need to go. It is a usual 7-5 to 9-hour flight to a connecting place plus 2 to 3 more hours on another flight. 3, he moved back to our native country when I was entering high school and has since created a new family with his second and only other child other than me, now 9 years old. This makes me happy, as he has a very loving family, and his entire side of the family lives there too and are constantly visiting him, being only a quick walk away. I have visited back there multiple times and visited during the 2022 summer, staying 1 month, and created lots of good memories with him, which I am grateful for. I know the thing most people would recommend would be to visit him, at least for 1 week, before anything happens and he probably passes. I just feel it is multiple stressful things impacting me. I don't think I would regret not seeing him before he passes, as I know he would have been with people he loves the entire way through. He's also proud of me, as I've essentially done everything he wanted for me. The main reason I would want to see him is for his sake, so he sees me. Ultimately, I probably should go, but I'm very conflicted, and I feel that makes me a shitty person. Edit. I know a lot of you are saying you wish you spent more time. You regret not having spent more time. I don't have those same thoughts, and saying them will not make my mind up. I have no regrets regarding my dad. I faced my fear multiple times since he moved back home and have spent many times with him. He made the right decision going back, forming a new family, and living a decent life. If he died this second, I would not regret not seeing him. But I know if I go, it'll probably be better overall and probably better for him as well. Edit 2. Please. I got the regret point after the first message. I've received 100+ responses saying the same thing, enough telling me you will regret it. Please say something novel or keep it to yourself. I don't need to keep seeing the same copy-paste response over and over. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I'm 57 years old. I've had cancer. I have children. I'm telling you this as a person, not as a father. In the end, life is about the people we surround ourselves with. And what matters most to others and yourself, you'll eventually find out, is showing up. Showing up for others when they're sick, at the funeral of a loved one, when they're getting married, when a child is born. Your presence is the most important present. Go see your father. Comment 2. When my aunt was dying, I visited her in the nursing home, and a lot of it I didn't like. But she was able to give me a final farewell, which I will always cherish. You're looking at this in terms of your goodbye to your dad. But what about his goodbye to you? Now for the update. Hey everyone. Thanks for all the comments on my last post. I've read through them and appreciate the different perspectives. Here's what's been happening since then. So I've been wrestling with the idea of visiting my dad, who's been really sick with brain cancer. It's been a tough week, full of unexpected turns and emotional moments. I guess life doesn't stop for anyone, not even when you're trying to make a hard decision. Let's start with the heartbreak. I finally decided to face my fears and booked the flights, despite my phobia of flying. I was set on seeing my dad, but then I got a call from my stepmom. She told me that my dad had taken a turn for the worse. He was asking for me, which just broke my heart. I felt like I had waited too long, and now I might not make it in time to see him. I've been trying to prepare myself for seeing him in such a bad state. I remember him as this energetic guy who was always the life of the party. He used to take me on these long hikes when I was a kid, telling me stories and teaching me about nature. It's hard to reconcile that image with what he's become now. As for the flights, they were as bad as I feared. The first leg was delayed, and I spent hours at the airport, my anxiety through the roof. Then, during the second flight, we hit turbulence. I was gripping the armrests, trying not to panic, thinking about my dad and how I should have been braver sooner. When I finally arrived, I was met with another surprise. My half-sibling, who's only 9, didn't recognize me at first. It's been a while since I last visited, and they've grown so much. It was a bittersweet moment, seeing them after so long, but under such sad circumstances. The confrontation came when I saw my dad. He was so frail, a shadow of the man I remembered. He couldn't talk much, but he knew I was there. We had this moment, just looking at each other, and I could see in his eyes that he was glad I came. It was overwhelming, and I had to step out of the room to catch my breath. I've been spending time with him, but it's tough. I keep thinking about the past, about how he moved back to our native country when I was just entering high school. He started a new life, and I was happy for him. He's got a loving family here, and they've been amazing. taking care of him and making sure he's comfortable. There's been some tension, though. My stepmom and I had a bit of a clash. She's been under so much stress, and I guess my arrival stirred things up. We had a disagreement about my dad's care, and words were exchanged. It wasn't our finest moment, but we apologized to each other later. We're both just trying to do what's best for him. I've been thinking a lot about the last time I was here, during the summer of 2022. We made so many good memories, and I'm grateful for that. It's those memories that are keeping me going right now, reminding me of the good times we had. I've also been reflecting on how my dad has always been proud of me. He's told me many times, and I've worked hard to live up to his expectations. I know he's happy with the life he's lived, and that gives me some comfort. But being here, seeing him like this, it's hard not to feel like I could have done more. I know I said I wouldn't have regrets, but being here, in the thick of it, it's different. It's not about regrets. It's about wishing for just a little more time. I've been trying to be strong for my dad and my little sibling. They need me to be the stable one right now. But it's hard when you're dealing with your own fears and emotions. I've been taking long walks like my dad and I used to, trying to clear my head. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.